The following discussion is intended to provide a perspective and is not intended as professional advice. These are merely things I have found useful. Please consult a healthcare professional for advice on proceeding. Dealing with anxiety. Many people who have been abused experience something that's commonly known as PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder. Anxiety can be a symptom of PTSD. So in this segment, we'll look at 3 ways of dealing with anxiety. The first one, breathing exercises. The second one is a technique called grounding. And the third one is something I like to call warping your reality. Let's have a look at that first technique. Breathing exercises. Breathing exercises really are a helpful exercise when you feel the anxiety starting to heighten. Ideally, you should be sitting down in a relaxed position when you do these exercises, but sometimes that just isn't possible. One great thing about breathing exercises is they can be done discreetly when you're in a crowd and no one has to notice that you have heightened anxiety. Here's how to do it. Breathe in for 4 seconds. Hold your breath for 7 seconds. Breathe out for 8 seconds. Now on to a technique called grounding. Grounding is a technique that uses tactile sensation in order to distract you from the heightened anxiety that you're feeling. Here's an example of how I do this. I purchased a bunch of cheap rings with different textures on them. I also went and I bought one of those fidget cubes that's easily concealable in the palm of your hand. The idea is you make your entire focus the texture that you're feeling and try and make that the sole focus instead of the anxiety that you're feeling. And the third technique we'll be looking at, something I call warping your reality. Most of us when we were kids had the ability to visualize whatever we wanted with our imagination. This is basically that same technique. The technique of warping your reality is very helpful for me, although it may seem rather silly to some. Basically what it is you use your imagination to imagine things differently than what they are. For example, the other day when I was walking to work, I was feeling rather anxious because I had just written a bunch about suicide. And as I'm walking along, I see a magpie and a fly flying in front of me. Now, rather than just seeing a magpie and a fly, I chose to see... Sorry.
I'm flying! Ah! I just defined what I am!
These are the ones that seem to work the best for me. You have to go through all the different techniques and find out what works for you. And just keep the methods handy. Make sure it's something easy that you can do when there's a stressful situation. The who's, why's, when, and how's of disclosure. One of the scarier things in life is having to discuss deeply personal things with others. This is even more difficult for someone who's been abused, especially if this abuse took place during the formative years, since trust is required to open up. Let's start with who you should disclose to. An important thing to remember when figuring out who to tell about the abuse is to not just tell anyone. Not everyone will be able to handle the reality of what you've gone through. You'll most likely want to tell a close friend, a close relative, someone that you can trust. Be sure it's someone that you feel will not tell others if you've decided that you don't want anyone else to know. Remember, it's your choice who knows. If you've already disclosed to someone else, why not talk to them and see what advice they have on telling someone else? Another possibility is to see if they're willing to come with you to help you tell someone else, if they are comfortable with that and you're comfortable with that. Next question is, why do you want to tell someone? Analyzing our motives for talking to others about the abuse can give us insight as to whether we're actually ready or whether or not it's appropriate to do so. Let's look at 2 scenarios. I got one. I broke my leg when I was 9 falling off a trampoline. Yeah, you think that's bad? I had to suffer through an Enya concert. I got you both beat. King of the tragedy here. I got gang raped when I was 6. Why would you just blurt something out like that? What was the motivation for disclosing here? It was to brag about past injuries, and meant to be lighthearted and fun. Definitely not the occasion to talk about abuse for the first time. Let's look at the second scenario. Yes, I don't know what to do. I just found out my dad has terminal cancer. Wow, that's rough, man. I mean, I was molested when I was a kid, and as I was pretty rough, and I pulled through. What was the motivation here? Well, it was an attempt at compassion for a friend who's going through a difficult time by offering them an example of adversity that you've personally overcome. That's a noble intention, to be sure, but in this instance, it takes the focus from them and their problem and puts it on you. Definitely not appropriate for this type of situation. We will look at a scenario with an example of how to correctly disclose the abuse in the section How to Tell. When is the right time? Deciding when and where to tell someone is as important as how you do so. You should only disclose when you are ready, not by anyone else's timetable. If you decide you're ready and have found someone that you're comfortable talking to, be sure to take into account how they're feeling in that moment. If it looks like that they have had a hard day and they're grumpy, now may not be the best time to do this. When you do decide that the time is right, make sure that the setting is appropriate for this type of discussion. You'll want a place where you can carry on a private discussion without either of you feeling embarrassed. Obviously, this is not a conversation you'd want to have at the food court in the mall. One thing you could do is invite them over for a meal. After you've eaten, when you're both relaxed, if you're feeling up to it, then you might disclose the abuse. Being in a setting that is relaxed will make it easier for both of you. This leads us to how you should tell. Imagine you're giving a lecture at a university. You go up on the stage and you just start speaking about the subject matter off the cuff without any preparation whatsoever. It wouldn't take long before others and yourself realized that you're in way over your head. You'd be fumbling all over your words and not much would most likely make sense. The same applies to disclosing abuse. Don't be afraid to write out ahead of time what you want to say, or even if you just want to do bullet points with main ideas of what things you want to discuss. You could practice saying it out loud to a mirror, or as silly as it sounds, even to a pet. Let's look at another scenario that shows a possible way of doing this right. Oh, man, that was filling. Did you hear on the news about that guy who was arrested for molesting all those kids over the years? Yeah, people like that make me sick. I feel bad for those kids having to go through that at such a young age. And I was around the same age when it happened to me, and I didn't really understand what was happening. I just knew that it was something bad. Wow. I had no idea, man. From personal experience, I found that when you tell people with as much as you can manage, an even voice, and try and keep calm and measured, and try and speak in a matter-of-fact type of way, it tends to put them at ease and makes it easier for them to accept. Decide ahead of time what level of information you're willing to share. Be sure not to go into all the fine details, as you for sure do not want to traumatize whoever you're telling. Disclosing can be very emotionally taxing, so remember to do some self-care exercises after. Go for a walk, write in a journal, whatever it is that you find relaxing. That's all for today's episode. Next week's episode will be another 2-parter. Part 1 will deal with depression and suicidal thoughts. Part 2 will be about self-doubt. Have a good week, and remember to take care of yourself. If you're looking for resources on helping yourself or someone else who has gone through abuse, you can visit rain.org. Or, for resources specifically for men, go to oneinsix.org. If you're struggling with thoughts of suicide, please call one of the numbers in your area on the screen.